Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Companies have been making a lot of intentional commitments to stakeholder capitalism, but there are few who are putting their money behind making real impact. SAP is making a conscientious effort to invest in money market funds, which support the higher objective of eliminating social inequity. Joining me to discuss is Supriya Jha. She's the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at SAP. Jerry Bernard, North America Investments and Capital Markets with SAP Treasury. And we have Neetin Datar, who's Vice President of Integrated Intelligent Enterprise with SAP Product Engineering. Supriya, it is great to see you. As always, I'll start with you for opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Jill, for having us today. We're very excited to be here on the Friday before Juneteenth to talk about SAP's commitment to social equity. As you know, I joined SAP last year, and my colleagues Nitin and Jerry have really inspired me, to do a lot around social equity. They're both the originators of a very cool investment idea that supports the higher objective of eliminating social inequity. So with that, off to you, Nitin and Jerry and Jill.
Thank you so much, Supriya. And Nitin, we'll start with you. Background and give us some background and introduce SAP America's Social Investment Initiative.
Thanks for having us, Jill. What got us started were the sad events of the first half of 2020. If you recall, George Floyd was murdered on May 25th, 2020, and there was a lot of anger, sadness, and frustration across the US, and it kicked off this whole social justice and BLM movement in the US. Our SAP board members and executives here in the United States all advocated for action over just words of support. With that backdrop, I started to read, have internal discussions with my colleagues and friends, and really watch announcements that SAP was making, as well as some of the other companies around us were making in support of the social justice and social equity. It helped me connect the dots. And it struck to me that perhaps we can do something about social equity with the cash flow that we had SAP generate every quarter. And then with a lot of help from Jerry and the Treasury team and our DEI team, we could shape it. And we could shape it in a way that we could stay within the guardrails of SAP's investment policies and meet SAP's return on investment objectives while doing good for the underserved communities where we do business in. It's very important to understand that this idea is not a charity step, but it is a good business practice and a social investment idea. It is about taking part of our cash reserves and placing it with financial institutions that also have a social and ESG mandate. It is all about doing good business while doing good for the communities where we live in, we work in, and we do business in.
And Jerry, what concrete placements have been made by SAP in the US?
Yes, obviously as a German company, SAP has liquidity across the globe, and we really added an ESG component as part of our SAP Global Treasury Investment Strategy going back to 2019, but primarily it was in sustainable green type deposits and investments. And then in 2020, with some discussions with Nitin and others, we'd look to have a strong focus in the US on these kinds of candidates for investments, but there were very few that met our requirements. And for SAP, we were really focused on sticking with US government money market funds, the fixed NAV type funds, very conservative. And there were really not that much in the way of alternatives back then. So we were really looking around, wanted to make sure that any solution would fit our guidelines and meet our liquidity requirements. And really, so starting back into early 2021, we've been investing with US government funds, which have a social mandate in which securities are purchased through minority-owned brokers and dealers, where there's a portion of revenue shared in special share classes, and where a designated portion of revenues is contributed to help fund scholarships to historically Black colleges and universities, or for instance, scholarships to Black women in STEM fields, for example. So we started with one fund. We are now at 3 funds, and right now a majority of our overnight liquidity on the US side is in these types of money market funds.
And Jerry, what does SAP intend to do going forward with regards to supporting diversity and inclusion via corporate cash investments?
Well, we'll continue to pursue the policy. And again, these are baby steps. We started off really not knowing much about this field, and we started with one. We're now at 3 funds. We plan to continue to invest in these types of funds. And also, I think on the fund side, there are more folks that are looking to respond to customers like ours, like SAP, that come looking for these kinds of alternatives. They might have a very conservative treasury investment policy, so they're looking for a solution that fits within that conservative philosophy. So we continue to look to invest the majority of our overnight funds in these types of investments. And really, the next steps as we see it are to push for more fund manager accountability and transparency, so we can really understand where our investments, the earnings on those investments are going, how they are supporting these stated mandates. We also, of course, do need to comply with our internal policies and also need to manage our liquidity in the US and as part of the global SAP SE organization.
And Nathan, to wrap up here, what can organizations do to support social initiatives through corporate investing?
Jill, we would love to see other companies join in. They can take this idea that we just talked about and make it their own, because I'm sure they have their own guardrails that they need to work with. ESG, as you know, is a burgeoning topic and on the radar of most boards. Company leaders like chief HR officers, chief financial officers, and chief DI officers, they're always looking for actionable ideas in ESG. We would be happy to share what we have done if that helps them. We look forward to even learning from them. Our main motivation is to see if we can scale and increase the impact on social inequities. Our dream would be to see more companies allocate a portion of their cash holdings into efforts like ours. It will certainly open up more opportunities for the underserved, and I believe our world would be a better place.
Okay, Team SAP, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thank you.
Thank you.